Okay, I think we're just getting started over here. I'm just gonna check that everything is working okay, and I'm gonna choose my starting point. Hey Tish, can you see me and hear me all okay, Tish? If you can let me know. Oh, and everyone else in the guys could just let me know that camera, sound, all of that is good. That would be great. I'm just gonna move to where the place that I wanted to start at, because the market should be packing up now, but it's still very much here. So I'm just trying to navigate and find some space. Hey Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're doing good. And that God, it's so bright. I should have brought my sunglasses, but I was not expecting it to be this warm. It was supposed to be a horrible day here in the UK. But you know, one of those things. I mean, it is cold. As you can see, I'm still wearing my hat. We've been at about, well, when I left the house this morning, I was at 8 degrees. When I get home, we will be at about 11. So not too bad. And I think we still have about 5 minutes until we get properly started. So like I said, I'm just trying to position myself at the actual start place of the tour while I avoid everybody that is still trying to enjoy the market here in Salisbury today. Hey Anne, welcome Diane. Thank you so much for joining us here. Hope you're having a really lovely day. I'm also trying to find a spot in the shade because the brightness is at the top and I can't see the screen. So I hope I'm actually pointing at the right place. Oh, okay, this is better. Ah, perfect. And it's right where we normally start here in Salisbury, so that should be good. Oh, awesome, good. Great, I'm glad that you are. Oh, Gregory, here you are too. Great, excellent. Well, I'm really looking forward to this live stream here in Salisbury. We're gonna just kill some time before we start properly speaking, just because I think we still have blah 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 5 minutes or so. I was early because my gimbal was doing something funny earlier, and then I realized when I get home I just need to adjust one of the dials. I think it's just gotten loose in the bag, but it's actually okay. I'm working fine. Hey Jeannie, how are you? Lovely having you here. I am making sure that I'm not in the way of everybody, because, well, you know what, I'll turn the camera so you can see that Salisbury is actually just that here today, because, well, it's market day, so it's packed and people are just starting to actually be leaving for home. So yeah, normally on a quiet day this would already be packing already, but well, I obviously forgot that it's Easter, isn't it? I don't know why they are leaving, guys. I'm so clueless. So yes, it's super busy, super full, and it smells glorious. Oh my God, if I could just send you through the screen all the smells that I've been collecting throughout the day, from smoked curries, all kinds of street food. Honestly, it's been glorious in here today. So, you know, this is the reason why I'm just trying to make sure I'm not right in the middle of the square, because there is still quite a bit of hustle and bustle in that sense. But yeah, so hope that you're all doing really good, and hope that you've been having a really good weekend so far. So I'm just gonna turn the camera until we start properly speaking. I don't want to leave anyone behind. I said we will be starting at 3 o'clock, and we will start properly at 3 o'clock. And my intention for today, I'll give you a quick breakdown of what we're gonna do today. Hillary, how are you doing? It's lovely seeing you again. Oh, I love the bunny, Tish. Well, we're gonna go from the market square, have a look at whatever there is still here, and we're then gonna go back through St. Thomas, because if we are lucky, there will still be a chance to see St. Thomas before services start properly. I think that, if I remember correctly, when I asked, I swear they said it was at 3:30 to 4 that they were starting to pack up. So it would be great if we can see St. Thomas, because, well, some of you already would know this from previous Salisbury tours. There is a beautiful gift from from the world of art history in there. And then from St. Thomas, we'll make our way towards the main high street and onwards to the cathedral. That's more or less the plan, if that sounds good. Hey Linda, welcome, how are you? It's lovely having you here in Salisbury. And well, we have 2 minutes to get started properly. So, you know, just waiting. And I know Elizabeth is it's honestly a double-edged sword. So for those of you who don't know what Elizabeth is talking about, I had to make an announcement literally on Wednesday this week that unfortunately not of the tours that I do either in person or virtually anymore are going to include the Great Hall moving forward, because there has been a change in management, which to be fair was necessary, because the site was just run by the council. Now it's run by an actual cultural trust, which I'm sure has the best interest of the site at hand, but that has meant a lot of changes to the visits, to the price of the tickets, to the things that they allow to do and the things that they don't allow to do. So as a result, until things normalize themselves, we're not going to be able to visit the Great Hall for the foreseeable future. So those of you who may want to see it, the only recording that there is available actually is on my Buy Me a Coffee. So that's the news that we had to deal with, and that is frankly a big punch in the gut for me, because I worked on that site for 2 years alone. So, but you know, I genuinely hope that it is for the good and the site sees, you know, some improvement in terms of maintenance and whatnot. So there you go. Hi everybody, and don't worry Elizabeth, I knew what you meant in any case. So, you know, that's been the situation, but worry not, because since the Great Hall is closed from that regards as a venue, I am exploring other places in Winchester that we're gonna visit, and I really hope that we can get to see some new places this spring and this summer. I still owe you a tour in St. Catherine's Hill and the area of St. Cross, so I'm gonna try to get that done now that the weather is drying up, and yeah, a lot more places all around, so hopefully lots of new things to see. And I believe it is now 3 o'clock, because I just heard the bell going. So hi everybody, hope you're having a really lovely day. Welcome to the stream. We're just about to get started here in Salisbury, Wiltshire, in the south of England. And in case you don't know me, my name is Dr. Lilian Céspedes González, Lily for everybody else, and I'm a historian. I have a PhD from the University of Winchester, and Salisbury is actually a town that you have to study a lot when you're a medievalist here in the UK, because, well, the cathedral is a huge accomplishment for the town, but in general the way the town develops is very closely linked to the Middle Ages and Britain from a representative viewpoint. So what I'm hoping to do today is show you what remains of the historic town. We're obviously not going to be able to see all the town, but a big chunk. We're going to walk through the market, see whatever is left in the market since they're packing up, and then we will walk through the other side streets until we get to the beautiful cathedral. And by the way, in about a month's time, I will be doing a slightly different tour of Salisbury, which will include footage inside of Salisbury Cathedral. So if you want to see that, I'll be looking forward to meeting you in April. And now I'm going to turn so we can start seeing things. Hey Mitzi, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salisbury. Right, well, bear with me while I start being able to get away from people, but we are right here in the Market Square, also known as the Guildhall Square, because the big building that we have there in front of us is the Guildhall, and this is where the market of Salisbury takes place, normally always on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but for quite some time now it's been other days of the week. And as you can see, many of the stalls are now packing up, but a few others are still here. Now, in terms of what you can find in this market is all kinds of things, from vintage to food to second-hand stuff, and I mean generally stuff in all kinds of things, trinkets, you know, video. This is pretty much a general market in that regards. Julie is a perfectly good question. We are Salisbury is the capital and main important city in the county of Wiltshire, which is just kind of northwest of Hampshire, where we normally tour. Hey Sandra, thank you so much for being here. And yes, we're in England. We're in England for sure. Well, as you see, this is lovely vegetables, A lot of the crops that we actually have in here come from local farmers, and if they are not all that local, they definitely come from the surrounding areas. So the good thing about the market here in Salisbury is that you find legitimate produce that is either done independently and locally, or at very least promoted by people who are from the local area. So, you know, it inspires a lot of confidence from that regards, whether it's socks, as we have here on the right, to the curry here on the left, which has been making me hungry all day long. It's honestly a wonderful market to experience any time of the year, because this market runs every time of the year in that regards. And the market, by the way, has been running since 1227, when finally a charter by King Henry III actually gives Salisbury the ability to become a market town. Up until that moment in time, this was mostly just pasture fields. So this is the Guildhall, by the way, a gorgeous example of Georgian architecture here in the UK. This is all 18th century. You can see these massive windows, and it combines local limestone, which is what you see here on the left, with some brickwork, and the columns, which unfortunately have been quite heavily restored, and many of them now have quite a fair few bulks of cement, just purely for the sake of, you know, keeping it all together. Now, the Guildhall was originally the main area for administration of the city, but in this day and age is mostly like art gallery, place for community events and that kind of stuff. So, you know, bits and pieces really in that regards. I'm glad that no worries, guys. typos always get us somewhere. Most of the time we all know what we mean. So as you see, it's a pretty large market, and the reason why the market still happens here is because although Salisbury is a market town, and the town is very much developed for the sake of commerce and economic growth, originally those first charters for the development of the city were, as you see, market stalls that came here on Tuesdays and Saturdays under the patronage of Henry III, and that was to essentially promote people moving into the area to help Wiltshire grow. In case that you don't know much about Wiltshire, this area is frankly often under the radar. The most famous thing in the area of Wiltshire is perhaps Stonehenge, which is about 20 minutes by car north of Salisbury. So that's normally what people come to visit here. Other than that, Wiltshire is renowned for its historical landscapes, the Salisbury Plains, which have been inhabited by early civilizations pretty much since the Neolithic. So it's a very important area from the point of view of the development of human civilization in the UK, but it doesn't actually have a lot of industry or many things going, you know, for itself. So in an attempt of revitalizing the area and creating another point of connection between the area of Winchester, where Henry III was actually located at the Great Hall in the 13th century, and other economic and cultural centres such as Bath and farther up to Bristol, Salisbury becomes a nice place to make those links, essentially. Do they do a Christmas market? Well, yes, Elizabeth. On top of the normal market, in Christmas they have their sort of own Christmas market. Normally every single year, which is often run by the same people that run the normal market, but they do make it up to be a Christmas market. And well, one of the most amazing things that we have here in Salisbury is what you can see in the building right in front of us. Now, this building has been heavily restored in the 1930s, if I remember correctly, but as you can see, this is an original wooden timber frame from the later Middle Ages over already to Tudor period, and that's actually something Salisbury is very famous for. Since the town kind of materializes out of thin air in 1227, the majority of those buildings were traditional medieval buildings, and many of them have still been preserved. So we're gonna see several of those. Mind you, many of them have received extensive repairs, so they are not all entirely original, but nonetheless important. Now, before we talk about that, I would like to show you a little plaque that there is here on to our right, behind the Guildhall, and that a plaque that actually tells us about the Trafalgar Way. I don't know if you're familiar with the Trafalgar Way, but it's essentially that red line that you see there goes from Falmouth all the way to London. And this is the essentially causeway that the postie carried the news about the fact that the British had won at the Battle of Trafalgar against the Spanish and French forces. This was very important news for the Empire, and Salisbury is going to be pivotal in the transportation of those news. Now you're probably wondering, why Salisbury? Well, in the same way that it had been pivotal to connect Hampshire back in the day with other places farther up into the English West Country, Salisbury is an area where there is always merchants, there is always people coming and going. So it was understood that it would be possible to get someone, if something failed, quickly enough from here to London to how important this town has been in terms of communications. And I'm glad that you like the combination, Julie. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but this is actually an original wooden shutter from the 19th century from this original family butcher, which by the way has been empty and doesn't operate for quite some time now. But I'm just gonna get close to it so you can actually see I'm not messing about. And this is, you see, this is proper legit. This is not something like metal and what have you not. I think it's been put up for redevelopment, and I hope that it shines light again, because, you know, traditional independent businesses like this in a town like Salisbury ought to have been up and running. Hey Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you're doing good. Well, we're now gonna move from Fish Row onto Butcher Row. Now, as you can see, the names of these streets are pretty straight to the point, and just so you can see that I'm not messing about, that is exactly what they're called. And the reason behind the names of the streets to be quite practical is because, in case you couldn't tell, the town of Salisbury, and in fact since we're at an intersection, this will become very apparent, is actually built on a grid. It's all perpendicular and parallel lines in that sense. So it's very easy to navigate, and that is the virtue of building a town pretty much from scratch. Now, the idea behind making this town in this way was to control and to section the businesses. With the charter that Henry III gives the city to create this market town, there is also the development of a very important medieval document that we call a checker book. And a checker book is kind of like the medieval version of our old phone books. If anyone remembers those, you know, you could go to this thing and find out what business was where, and then you could get their details, call them, etc., etc. Well, the checker book was sort of the same, located, and for the sake of also ensuring that there was not too much stark competition. As you can see, this area of the Market Tavern is where we have found on the other side of the square all of those pubs and original inns. So it was important that there were, you know, different businesses doing similar activities, but not too many, because you didn't want merchants to run out of business, essentially. Competition had to be, you know, still orderly in that regards. And here we have, by the way, the famous Ox Row Inn, which has been actually here since the 16th century, 1593, if I remember correctly. What used to go through the middle of the street, see how the stones are different? Oh, this is just purely for canalization. I don't know if you can see that in the middle of the street itself is where we have the drains. The street is not entirely flat, it's slightly wonky to ensure that when the water flows, it goes through the middle of the road, and that helps actually water flushing. That was already something that we think had been implemented in the Middle Ages, because of course, particularly in a street like this, consider that we deal with butchers, fish, etc., etc. Smells and whatnot had to be rinsed away, and that was a matter of essentially cleanliness. And this may seem surprising to us, but actually it's just Henry III's son, Edward I, in Winchester Great Hall, funnily enough, that will pass one of the earlier water sanitation laws in this country. So, you know, these things were actually taken into consideration a lot more than we actually give the Middle Ages credit for. Yes, exactly, Julie, you had the right idea. And wonky can be good. Mind you, it's a good thing that it's flat slabs, because otherwise the cobbles would destroy my feet. But yes, it was, you know, done in that way in purpose. Now you can see this is all still the traditional medieval layout. All of these roads are very narrow, and that's because, well, the town of Salisbury hasn't really had many changes done to it ever since the Middle Ages. It became very successful into attracting merchants and travelers from all places here, and as such it's mostly always lived of what you see, which is, well, this. This is the lovely flower cellar that we have here. Not just flowers, there are a few other plants, and it's actually in a part of the market that before was used for something completely different, because this lovely building that you have here is the poultry cross. And I mean poultry indeed, from, you know, chickens and other little birds that we eat. Well, the original building was from the Middle Ages, but the buttresses that you see around it are actually an addition from the 19th century. We have a similar situation to that in Chichester, and actually Ginny can vouch for me in that regards. And the idea behind the poultry cross is that you knew that this was the section of the market where you came to buy, you know, poultry. Just like in Butcher Row, you went to the butcher, and in Fish Row, you went to the fishmonger. By controlling and having carefully curated where everybody was supposed to be doing business, there was easier way of regulating competition, easy way of collecting taxes, and in general, it helped people navigate what was essentially a huge market, because the market occupied the whole town. So, you know, it was actually very properly done. Oh, hey, Helen and Polly, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you're doing good. A chicken palace, just dish. I'll take that. And just here, of the just off the chicken palace, we have two gorgeous buildings that have always been in a fantastic state of repair. Right here in Minster Street, which is the Victorian timber frame that you see here for W. Carter and Son, some of the best jewelers in the south of England. They've been operating since 1817, if I remember correctly. And next to it is the Hunch of Venison, which is supposedly one of the most haunted buildings in Salisbury. It's currently a restaurant for a really long time. It was a merchant's house, but this has also been an inn, pub, etc., etc., always related to those travelers that were coming and going. And as a result, well, I guess since a lot of people must have come through it, apparently it has more than one or two ghosts. I've personally not seen them, so I cannot vouch for it, but the building itself is fantastic. And I think it really speaks volumes, the kind of character and city that Salisbury is. So there we go. Excellent. Oh, I'm glad that you guys are loving the sights. Well, I just need to I need to cross in here, and you're gonna have to forgive me because there are several areas of the city that are currently going quite strong maintenance. You know, we're approaching high season, and therefore everybody wants their business to look nice and dapper. So there are a few scaffoldings here and there, but it's important that we cross here now because we're trying to get in time to the Church of St. Thomas before it closes. So let me see if we can actually do that. Am I in a chicken in the throne? Let's just get over here. Now, as you can see, even outside of the market, all of this is just commercial areas, and it's not just shops that you would find in any single English town high street. A lot of these are individual, independent, local. So that's the reason why a lot of people actually choose Salisbury to come here to do things like Christmas shopping, because it's without having to go to London, you have really good variety. Right, the signal goes sometimes a bit funny when we get through this tunnel, so please bear with me while I get through, because I want to show you the back end of St. Thomas of Becket, which is this beautiful church. Is, by the way, a Grade 1 listed building, and it is from the 13th century. Yes, the buses here are a bit reckless. Traffic in general is quite reckless in Salisbury. Now, the church is of course dedicated to St. Thomas Becket, which was actually brutally murdered at the cathedral in Canterbury, and we see actually a lot of churches that date from the 13th century being dedicated to this saint, probably under royal commission to try and expiate the sins that the king had pretty much indulged into by partaking in the brutal murder of the archbishop. So it's not unusual to have a church to St. Thomas Becket here. As you see, this is the rear entrance. We're gonna try and go in through the main door. I think it should still be open, but I'm not sure. So let me just try and get there quickly, because of course it's Easter. I completely forgot service is going, but I believe they said they were closing properly at 4, and I don't think I've spent an hour just yet, so hopefully it should be fine. Now, as we go towards St. Thomas Becket, let me tell you that the church is actually older than the cathedral itself. It's been here since 1219, 1220, if I remember correctly, and like I said, it's considered a great listed building because, as you can see, it's in a beautiful state of repair, and not many churches of this time period have actually been able to survive so well. Well, I can see that the flag is still out saying welcome, so you're gonna be very lucky. Now, if the church is occupied by anyone else, I may not be able to speak, and we may need to wait until I'm out of the church, but let me see what we have once we get in there. Righty. Okay. Oh, I think we may have it all for ourselves. Nearly. Well, here you go. This is St. Thomas Becket. It's a gorgeous church, as you can see, and the gift that I was mentioning at the beginning of the tour is the fresco that you actually have right in front of you, which, by the way, is an original fresco from the 15th century. It's one of the best preserved pieces of art in England, and it's an absolute wonder. It's a representation of Doomsday. I'm sure you can appreciate that. I'm just gonna move to the lateral to show you the coffer vaults just now, but I just want you to take in this wonderful piece of art. I'm glad that you love it, Ronnie. Right, let's switch over. So as you see, the ceiling of this church is still wooden vaulted. Those wooden vaults are actually from Georgian times, but they are in a pretty good state of conservation, which is just, well, a miracle. The church in general is in a very good state of repair, to be frank. And the amount of light that comes through is really great. I will repeat this in case you cannot hear me very well, because I'm speaking quietly since there's a few people here. And as you can see, this organ, which is very important, was gifted by George III to the Cathedral of Salisbury, which one was given to the church. I'll talk about music a bit more in a few moments. Right, I'm just gonna head back out and do a quick recap of everything that I've just said. I'm just gonna retrace our steps back. And one last view of the fresco. Okay, we're heading back. Alright, so since I'm outside now and I can speak a bit more freely, a couple of people were praying, although most people were visiting. I didn't particularly want to, be rude or interfere, but essentially, just recapping, the fresco that you've seen in there from the 15th century is a representation of Doomsday. It's the best preserved fresco, allegedly, in the whole of the UK. And it's beautiful. It's still in a pretty much almost 100% original state of repair, which is a wonderful thing to find. And the vaults, the coffer vaults that you've seen in there in wood, it's all from Georgian times, still mostly in a perfect state of repair. So, you know, I really hope that you've enjoyed that. That's as far as the Zoom can go, unfortunately, Julie. But like I said, in the other tour that I'll be doing of Salisbury in about a month's time, which also includes a visit inside of the cathedral, I can use a better Zoom because it's been recorded in a slightly different way. So I'll be able to send some pictures of that in future. Oh, Ronnie, I agree. I don't think, you know, even if you're not of a particular religious denomination or whatever, I still think you can appreciate beautiful art and architecture and what that has meant for people, because, well, it's all part of you know, human artistic output at the end of the day. Well, we're just gonna turn around here in the Maltings. This is part of more of the shopping malls that we have in the area of Salisbury. There's honestly so many, and these shopping centers are kind of street malls, like similar to the ones in the United States. Some others are more traditional department stores, like what we're used to in the UK. So there is a good variety, and you know, it really caters to absolutely everybody. And well, we're about to enter a very famous part of Salisbury because of a couple of sites, but because of well, a happening that took place in this area much more recently. And the age of everything. Oh, Julie, that's amazing. Well, as you see, this area is very busy because this is a pub. If there was any doubt, it's a Saturday in the UK, the weather is glorious, so it's a pub and it's full of people. So there you go. This is the Bishop's Mill, because we are right on the old side of the mill of Salisbury, here over our tributary of the River Avon, and I'm just gonna get us over to the other side so I can give you a proper good view of it all. But as you can see, this is all very lively animated, and you can still see the canalization that was done for the mill to make use of the river just over here. The water actually comes quite quickly and strongly, so we need to be careful. We don't want to lose the gimbal over there. But let me just get a little bit farther away from the people and the water as well, so I can tell you why this site is actually quite famous. Now, it's not just the fact that it is a great pub in that regards, 100% agree, Tish. Whoever decided to make the pub in here had a great eye. But this place became really famous and in the news. In fact, many of you perhaps will remember, because in 2018 there was an attempt on the life of a Russian double agent here. And that's of course Sergei Skripal and his daughter, who I believe is called Laura, but I could be getting that wrong. In any case, Skripal had been a known double agent for quite some time, and it seems that for whatever reason he had actually come here to meet up with his daughter for lunch. They had already been tailed when they were having a pint here, a drink at the Bishop's Mill, and later on when they reached their destination at the restaurant that they were eating at in Prezzo, out of all places. For those of you who are from the UK, you know what Prezzo is, but I'll explain for the rest. Prezzo is like a quite average Italian sort of restaurant. I guess it's kind of like similar to our version of the Olive Garden. So they ended up eating in there, they get poisoned by the people that targeted them, and the worst part is that, I mean, they ended up pretty badly, but other people were also poisoned as a result of this attack, locals, and they actually died. So it made the news, and it was, you know, all quite serious. It was really horrible. And you know, Salisbury, like I said, is a pretty quiet town. Nothing much really happens in Salisbury most of the time. So for them to actually hit the news for something like that, it was a really big deal. So, you know, it was a massive thing. Oh, thank you, Linda. You're very kind. Hey, Ashrith, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing? And well, yes, we haven't done Salisbury in a long time, so I'm not surprised. But well, the day is definitely lending itself to it. Now, normally I cross the road over here, but since the King's Head is undergoing some renovations, we're gonna skip that part, and instead I'm just gonna look for the shade so I can show you what officially was the edge of Salisbury. The town of Salisbury ended up here. That in front of us is the clock tower. This is from the 15th century. It holds the clock, which is of course a lot more modern. And on top of marking the border of the town itself, which is very well delineated by the fact that the river crosses through there, and that is the end of that, the prison of Salisbury used to be right here in the late Middle Ages. So the idea was that, this being a market town, it was perceived that there could be quite a fair few criminals trying to make, I guess, a good day out of it. So by keeping the prison outside of the town, it was a way of also ensuring public order and safety for everybody. So that's the reason why sort of here in a bit of a strange place, because as you can see, Salisbury continues over this way. This is the way that you go to the station, and they have now a lot of sort of shops and residential areas here, but it's only something relatively recent. In the Middle Ages as such, it was literally the end of town. And well, this is the King's Head Inn, which has been here for an awful amount of time, several hundred years, but it is actually been undergoing quite heavy renovations. So what we're gonna do is grab the other crossing so that we don't have to go underneath scaffolding, and that will take us closer to the High Street, so we can enter the area of the cathedral. And by the way, thank you so much for everybody watching. I've just realized there is 43 people watching, so wow, thank you so much. I hope you're enjoying Salisbury. And they got, they got Putin's favorite brew. Yes. Joining us in terms of what I was mentioning of the Skripal situation, it actually, everything that unveiled here in Salisbury actually led to a huge investigation which proved that there had been interference in British politics by the Putin regime. And that's something that actually came through during the pandemic. A lot of people did not find this out because, of course, during the pandemic, many other things were happening and not everybody noticed that. But, well, it's something that became very clear, and the way Putin did this was, well, through the usual way that this Russian megalomaniac tends to do things, which was by using the Russian oligarchy, mobsters, kingpins, etc., that are, well, everywhere, to influence politicians under their control. And in fact, we do know that Boris Johnson personally actually profited from this intervention. So it has raised more than one eyebrows into the general state of affairs here in the UK. Well, we're now, properly speaking, in the High Street here at the intersection of New Canal, and we are going to start walking towards the cathedral. Oh, I'm sorry then, Ashraf. I'm doing this through Prism, and it's telling me so far that the connection has been pretty steady, but there have been quite a lot of interferences depending on what devices you use, because there is a lot of people. So even though Prism and my internet may be okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that on the receiving end of things are always crisp and crystal clear. So try and refreshing. It should be more or less okay. And here you have yet another timber frame. This is the entrance to the Old George Mall, which is allegedly one of the most famous in the city. As you see, people come and go from it quite frequently. And it's another beautiful building which is actually missing a window since earlier on this year due to very, very nasty winds that we've had in the area. And no worries, Tracy. Well, you can always watch from the beginning, so it's no sweat. The video will actually remain on YouTube afterwards, guys, so do not worry if you have to dash or come in and out. It's really not an issue. Well, it's finally cleared up because this was very full of people earlier, but we are now indeed walking towards the cathedral. You're gonna start seeing the cathedral. It's kind of impossible not to see the cathedral from different views of this town, because as you see, everything in the area. Now, as I do that, let me tell you a couple more details about the history of Salisbury. By the way, the restaurant that you're gonna see here on the right, Prezzo, which is another beautiful timber frame, is that restaurant that was related to the Skripal incident. And yes, I do have a much nicer day here today. It's lovely. It's quite warm, actually. I'm starting to be a bit wearing too many layers. But anyway, so in case you didn't know, the town of Salisbury has only been, properly speaking, called Salisbury since 2007-2008. Before, this area was actually known as Sarum, and Sarum comes from the old Saxon word that we have for the previous settlement from which Salisbury originates. Now, I told you that Salisbury had only been here since 1227, give or take, but the actual population had been there pretty much since prehistory. We know that there was a Bronze Age Celtic hill fort in the area of Old Sarum, which is literally just 2 kilometers from where the cathedral is, and as a result, the Romans created a castrum in there. Then the Saxons upgraded it ever so slightly, but it was really the Normans after 1066 that really put a lot of money and effort into the area of Old Sarum. It's the only hill really in the area, and therefore it really lends itself well to its military defense. But it was quite a small area, it was quite restricted. So eventually they decided they need more space. Now legend has it that the very location for the town happens through somebody who picks a bow, throws an arrow, and they say where the arrow falls is where the town, or in this case the cathedral, will start from. It's a legend though, because it's over 2 kilometers. Nobody, with no matter what kind of bow, would have been able to do that shot unless it was some kind of magic. And if that's the case, I'll leave you to decide that part of the story to be truthful or not. But that's how the legend of Salisbury being created as a new town happens. So first they build a cathedral, and that's the reason why we have this massive gate, because the cathedral cloister is still closed, and it closes at 11 p.m. every day. And then, well, the rest of the town follows afterwards. But the cathedral was here first, essentially. Only, well, for us, I know what you're saying, Elizabeth, but for us, that's a relatively new town in those regards. Now, here is, by the way, before we move, my favorite place in all of Salisbury. And I know as a historian this is going to sound bad, but this is Rolly's Fudge Pantry. It's a typical fudge seller here in the UK. They've won every single award you can ask for, and they have something that is hilarious. Behold the fudge henge, which is essentially a representation of Stonehenge with fudge. I think this is the most amazing thing that was ever done by anybody. Whoever had the idea is a genius. And by the way, the fudge from this shop is amazing. And in case that you cannot come to Salisbury directly to pick it up, they do deliver, at least to the UK. So if you have a sweet tooth like me, don't miss the chance, essentially. Substitute your Easter chocolate for Easter fudge. I'm sure it's all the same in this regards. And yes, Tracy, very much British weather in that sense. Well, as you see, we start being dominated by the presence of the cathedral. It's gonna properly come to full view in a few moments. But before we do that, I would like to point out the building that we have here on the left. They were in Italy last night. Hope versus reality. On your way. Well, Elizabeth, if you meet me before 5 p.m., I'll buy you the fudge. I'll treat you to it. This building is currently residential, but historically it was one of the buildings for the school of the cathedral, and it is one of the best examples that we have in the area of traditional Georgian architecture. As you can see, it's in a perfect good state of repair. We have these classic lines, everything square, everything symmetrical, clean, which is what really predominates in the 18th century here in Britain. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Georgian style, Georgian is essentially the variation of neoclassicism that we have in the UK, but we call it Georgian because it flourishes during the time period of the three Georges, because they come essentially back to back in that sense. So in the same way that we call Victorian architecture after Queen Victoria, because, well, she pretty much lives the whole century, that's the reason for it. And well, we're just coming over to anyone have it? Well, if we ask maybe the doctor, for those of you who don't know who the doctor is, I'm referring of course to Doctor Who, a very typical sci-fi series of the UK. I am sure that if you ask the doctor very politely to get you in the TARDIS and bring you to Salisbury today, 29th of March, or 30th even of March, at 3 p.m. for a fudge with me, I'm sure he will make an exception, and he will make quite a nice quirky episode, I suspect. But there we go. And yes, it is. The cathedral has a huge agenda during this time period. And part of the reason for that is, I've not mentioned it, but actually something that is very much associated with the city of Salisbury is art. Not just art in terms of the creatives that we have in this day and age, but music. Since the 18th century, choral music and organ music have been super important for the development of the city and its identity. And as a result, well, the agenda is quite prolific. And a pricey ticket, but very worth it. I would love it if David Tennant would just materialize here with you. That would be awesome. And well, this is the main event, guys. There are not many words that need to be used to describe this cathedral because it is gorgeous. It's a wonderful example of Gothic, and not just a wonderful example of Gothic, guys. I don't know if you know this, but Salisbury Cathedral is actually considered the best example of early English architecture, meaning fully fleshed from our own bag of tricks without necessarily being entirely dominated by French architectural standards. Now, it surprises a lot of people that it is quite a, I guess, bland cathedral from the point of view of architecture, and that's because, well, consider that this is built in 1220-ish and finished 38 years afterwards. At that moment in time, Gothic is only just really coming to life in the UK. The previous example that we have of that is Wells Cathedral, which is a bit farther down towards the west coast in the area of Somerset. And Salisbury borrows from that early style that is developed in Wells, which is still a little bit quirky. I'm sure that you can see that the windows in here are not those typical windows that you expect, which are massive and shedding a lot of light. They tend to be actually quite narrow and long. These typical lancet windows, as we call them, are a lot more simple, not as ornate as those as we expect to find, for example, in France or in some places we've visited in Spain. But you know, it is one of a kind. It still borrows a lot of examples from Romanesque architecture in that regards. I'm sure you can see it's actually quite tall in terms of, you know, height, and I'm not just talking about the spire, which I'll show properly in just a moment. I'm talking just the actual height of the building itself, and it's quite short in terms of the length of it, which is a bit peculiar. Now, that is all entirely done on purpose, because then when you go inside of Salisbury Cathedral, which unfortunately is not a thing for today, but like I said, later on in April I'll be showing this footage, the light play that is created in that central nave is breathtaking, and it's entirely done through that play with, you know, architecture and geometry. So there you go. Right, I can see there is a couple of comments on the chat. Let me just catch up very quickly. And yes, I'm glad that you like the building. It's honestly quite lovely. My claim to fame. Oh, that's amazing. Wow. Great. Well, I'm very, very happy that you're all in love with the cathedral. Now let me get a little bit closer to show you the spire. Well, the spire of Salisbury Cathedral comes at about 100 years after the main building is finished, which is the reason why, although the light here is not falling in the best way, you can see that it actually has quite a lot of detail. So it's quite a stark contrast between the more simple, clean cut of the main body to then this spire, which, by the way, is the tallest Gothic spire in England and has been so since the 16th century. The spire actually is 123 meters, if I remember correctly. Can't remember how many feet that equiparates to, but anyway, the impressive thing about the spire is not just the huge vertical thrust that really makes this, you know, absolutely outrageous. Believe it or not, that spire weighs the best part of 6,000 tons, which is not exactly something the building was prepared for and has caused some structural problems since then, but thankfully it's all still, you know, hanging in there. Now, between the early representation of Gothic and the spire that we have in here, Salisbury completely steals the claim to being one of the best examples of Gothic in the UK, overall speaking. And I know, right, to consider that this day and age we can barely build a building and make it last more than 10 years, and yet this thing is still standing up there. We can stand on the shoulders of giants, don't we? Entirely true, Polly. Well, there is one more thing that I want to show you in this cathedral before we finish the tour, which is actually the front screen, which is just over on this side. And for that we need to go sort of halfway through the next pathway to be able to take it all in one go, because it's, well, massive. And it is thanks to this front screen that you're gonna see the slight, I guess, architectural and artistic design problem that Salisbury had when it was originally done in the 13th century. Now, obviously, as an early example, it means that, well, Gothic develops in many, many different ways, and by the 19th century, frankly, a lot of people thought that Salisbury Cathedral was too plain in comparison to other examples that we have in the kingdom. Without going much further, many of you have toured with me in Winchester. You know it is considered one of the best examples of, well, the best example, in fact, of English perpendicular Gothic. We have beautiful cathedrals in the country. Without going to stereotypical examples like Westminster Abbey, Peterborough Cathedral is very famous for having that triple Gothic entry, which is unparalleled in not just in the country but in many other places in Europe. And of course York Minster, which is another beautiful example of Gothic architecture. So it seems that in the 19th century, because Salisbury really didn't have much going for itself then, they decided that this needed a bit of an oomph. At least I wrote down some names. Oh, I'm glad that you did, Tracy. So you see that this is quite full of decoration, right? Well, would you believe me if I told you that out of the 76 statues that are on the actual front screen now, only 7 of them are from the Middle Ages. This was actually mostly barren during the medieval period and all the way to the 19th century, because following the tradition of early Gothic of Wales, what we encounter here is still mostly a Romanesque facade. And you know, in Romanesque what we want is a proper solid, strong structure, not necessarily lots of pretty decoration. Romanesque was supposed to be an architectural style that was imposing and really, you know, awe-inducing. Gothic is all about getting you into a different mindset, getting you closer to God, elevating you through the light. So a very stoic facade didn't really quite scream, you know, wonder of the British imperial machine. So, as a general consideration, the majority of the statues that you see here were incorporated then to make the cathedral a bit more, you know, interesting to look at, rather than just being a lot of just, frankly, plain white limestone. But I don't know if you can tell, because, well, I appreciate that the detail can only go into so much. Obviously, the craftsmanship in some of them has not been the greatest. They were working really fast to make it happen, and many of them are already quite eroded. In fact, several of these have been replaced already over in the last few years. So, you know, it's been one of those things that it may trick you and make you think that this was already here in the 13th century, but actually it was not. And this happens not just with Salisbury Cathedral, it happens to many cathedrals and churches all over the world. So, you know, it's a complicated but interesting cathedral from that regard. And yes, Lincoln is also very beautiful, as well as Durham. So many cathedrals actually that require attention. And that is pretty much all for today, guys. So I'm just gonna turn around so I can say. So anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed Salisbury with this beautiful spring sunshine. It's starting to feel more like spring now that we've had in here. And I really hope that that has opened your mind to, you know, another town of the UK that often doesn't deserve a lot of attention by outsiders, even though it has plenty of things to offer, other than just being close to Stonehenge. If I can, I will try and get some footage up in Old Sarum, so you can see how the settlement started and how we ended up here. I have some videos, I think, from when I was there last time, but I'll have to see if they are still working. And well, Chichester is indeed, I was planning on going there in May for the Chichester Roman, God, I'll say it, the Roman week, but apparently they've had a lot of problems with funding this year, and James is not gonna go, so maybe I'll do it at some other time. I was hoping that we could steal some nice Romans for the tour, but you know, that will have to wait for some other time. No worries, guys, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you've really enjoyed it. It's my absolute pleasure, and yeah, I'm really happy that you've been able to see not just the architecture but enjoy the vibe of the town with the market and everything else. And well, that's all for today. If you would like to support us, you have pinned in the chat the way into donating through PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. And yeah, we will be doing more of these shortly in the future. I will be releasing the schedule of tours and whatnot in the last few days. I've just been very busy with in-person tours and haven't really had much time at home. But if you're around tomorrow, I have a Zoom talk, and I owe you a tour in Portsmouth that will be happening in a couple of weeks' time. So I'll be seeing you very soon. Thank you so much for all of your support, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye-bye.